It's been a few years since I started sewing on my own, and patchwork has become one of the things I'm especially drawn to. I usually work with simple square designs, but I'd love to learn more deeply and improve my patchwork skills. So this time, I thought I might try something a little different from usual. I've been wanting to try motif-based patchwork, and I've been collecting ideas from books and social media for a while. It always felt a little too complicated, so I kept putting it off. But I feel like it's finally time to take the first step. I'd love to share the little discoveries and feelings that come up along the way, and I hope you enjoy it. This time, I'm planning to make 2 placemats. For the color palette, I'll be working mainly with purples and blue-greens, and choosing a few other colors to go along with them. For the cutting and construction, I followed a tutorial from Diary of a Quilter. I'll leave a link in the description too. Using the cutting chart listed toward the bottom of the page, I decided to make my blocks in a 4x4 inch size. Since I need 4 different types of squares, I thought it might be easier to write down the names in sizes like this, just to keep everything a little more organized. Just to share a quick update, I've actually only finished about half of the cutting so far. It's taking much longer than I expected, and it's already night. I think part of the reason is that this is my first time working with this pattern, and I'm still trying to figure out how it'll all come together. So I'm not quite sure how much fabric I should prepare for each piece. So instead, I'm sewing a few blocks first, and then I'll come back to finish the rest of the cutting. Also, I've found that switching to a different part of the process helps me keep things going. So this feels like a better way to move forward. Now that I've finally finished all the cutting, and I can finally start sewing. I was expecting it to be a bit more complicated, but I was surprised by how simply it comes together from squares. It's such a clever method. I've been sewing for a while now, but I still feel like there's so much to learn. I've been working on them little by little whenever I have some free time. As I go, I feel like I'm starting to understand a few things. One thing I've noticed is that carefully matching the corners and intersections really makes a difference in how clean the final piece looks. I think this is true for patchwork in general, but in this case, since each block is made up of smaller pieces, even small misalignments seem to affect the whole block more. Also, when using fabrics with lines, like plaid or stripes, I feel like even slight shifts in the seams tend to stand out more. So I try to keep that in mind as I sew. I don't think it always has to be perfect, but I feel like taking a little extra time to pay attention to these small details can actually make things easier to sew and help prevent having to redo seams. I also wanted to talk a little about how I'm pressing the seam allowances. After sewing these 3 rows together, you end up with 2 seam allowances like this. I couldn't really find much information about which direction to press them, so at first, I didn't think too much about it and just pressed them outward like this. But then I noticed that when joining the blocks together, the seam allowances would overlap, and it created quite a bit of bulk. You can see how thick it gets here. It's still the same even if I rotate one of the blocks. So instead, I decided to try pressing them inward. That way, by alternating the direction of the blocks, I can avoid stacking the seam allowances on top of each other. I'm not completely sure if this is the right way to do it, but I feel like this method gives me more flexibility when arranging the blocks. So I'm going to go with this approach for now. I've finally finished sewing all the blocks. Arranging them while looking at the overall balance is always such an exciting part. It ended up taking me days to finish sewing all the blocks, but seeing them all come together like this feels really satisfying. this is how they turned out, and I love them. I know it's not perfect, but because I spent so much time making them, I've grown really attached to them, and they've become pieces full of memories. My first patterned quilt was so much fun, and more than anything, I learned so many things I had never known before. I love to try a different design next time too. And if you have any recommendations or requests, I'd really love to hear them.